if you were to look at the, kind of the modern psychology and what's really trending these days in terms of what modern psychology is saying, you'll find that there are some key, if you will, mottos that are being said over and over again. One of them is tolerance of the uncertain, being able to hold tolerance for uncertainty. And for me, whenever I look at modern psychology and what it's teaching us and what it's telling people to do, I often think back, do we have these concepts already in our tradition? And if they are, why not go directly to the source? Why not go directly to the prophetic and Islamic and Quranic source related to this? So when you think about tolerance of uncertainty, this is something that's part and parcel of Islamic belief. We don't really need to go all the way to modern psychology to find it. Here, we remind ourselves, the concepts that we find in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he talks about, لَعَلَّهُ خَيْرٌ, perhaps this is khair, there is some good in it. Or the hadith in which he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلُّهُ خَيْرٌ. Right? Wondrous is the affair of the believer, because in every matter there is going to be good in it. And it goes on to say that if he is happy, then he thanks Allah, and in that is good. And if he is harmed, and for many people they're feeling a sense of harm right now, or potential to be harmed, and he shows patience, the hadith says, there will be good for him. And here is a really important concept that for us, we have this general Islamic principle in our minds and hearts that all of our affairs are good, even though they may not seem like that at first. And this is important because then you're able to kind of carry this uncertainty that may be brewing, this fear of the unknown around us, knowing that ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. And this helps settle down the anxiety and the fear. So whereas in the non-Muslim, in the secular world, they're telling people to tolerate uncertainty, we already have that concept inside of our faith, already part of our deen, and something we need to really emphasize and to bring up, inshallah. If you look at other trending, if you will, mottos that are being used right now in modern psychology and what therapists and psychologists all over the place are saying to people in this time, they're also telling people to focus on hope over fear. And here again, I would rephrase this to make sure that it fits with our Islamic, and that actually our Islamic concept is what prevails here, which, while we understand the concept of focusing on hope over fear and looking at the glass half full versus half empty, these are concepts you must have already heard. But if you look at the Islamic belief, for us, we believe that we have to live our lives between بين الرجاء والخوف, right? Between hope and fear. And often the examples are given by our scholars that the believer, this concept of hope and fear are like the two wings of a bird. And only with those two wings is the bird able to sustain flight. But if you lose, or if you focus only on just hope, for example, then one wing is gone and it will eventually crash and fall. And if you focus too much on the fear, then the other wing is gone and you will also crash and fall. But the balance between the two, maintaining the balance between khawf and raja, right? Between fear and hope, is incredibly important and something that our deen emphasizes strongly. And here, I love this because it really talks about how you're realistic as a believer, right? There is an element of fear in this issue, but also an element of hope, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see this through, even though it is an unprecedented and scary time. Now, when you hear me talk about these concepts of Eurocentric psychologies and why is it that we have to go directly to modern psychology, and I always think, no, let's go back to our own traditions, because honestly, there is so much to draw from our own Islamic traditions that are already there and part of our worldview in its origin, right? And so when you think about how the inspirations behind the scholarship that taught us all of this, it's really important to remember here that our noble predecessors, those who came before us, studied the Quran and studied the Hadith and looked at all of the affirmations that we take from there. And we too should be doing the same, not just strictly going to whatever it is that's the current trending hashtag, if you will, at the moment. For me, my personal inspiration in looking at this work and really drawing from where is the Islamic coping and resiliency mechanisms that we can pull in. A lot of this is part of the research that we had done in the lab that I run at the Stanford Muslim Mental Health Lab, where we focus, one of the lines is we focus exactly on the origins, our Islamic origins and understandings of psychology, what today we call psychology, or in Islamic terms was called al-nafs, right? The study of the soul and self. And so many scholars, not just physicians, this was not limited to the medical field, but definitely our scholars of all of the ulum of the Islamic sciences had contributed to what became al-nafs, and today we might term Islamic psychology. But if you hear and understand, and I'll give you some examples from our tradition, because if you look at modern psychology and you look at the traditions in our Islamic tradition historically, you'll find that not only were they similar, but they actually surpassed and were even stronger. And I think for somebody from the faith communities that, you know, this is important that you go back into the tradition itself. For us Muslims, we need to know what our turath, our heritage tells us about these Islamic coping mechanisms. So we're not just looking at, you know, Eurocentric models and saying, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't really apply to me. So as I explained, there were the ones, these are the most common ones that are being told right now by psychologists and therapists everywhere. But if you look at, you know, for example, I'll give you one example of Imam al-Balkhi, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, who comes from the 9th century, and we've written quite a bit about him, because for him, he had a book called Masalih al-Abdan wal-Anfus, the otherwise now translated as Sustenance of the Body and Soul. And what's interesting, even at the title of the book, you'll see he says body and soul. So for us as Muslims, we never had an issue or a disconnect between the mind-body problem of Descartes. So we never had this issue. For us, it was all holistic understanding of the human self, of our minds, our hearts, and our ruh or spirits, all connected into one cohesive whole. There was never an issue or tug of war between them like you find in Eurocentric models, which is why taking things just directly from Western or Eurocentric psychology would be problematic without actually seeing how that integrates correctly into our Islamic mechanisms.